Welcome back to Winter Wolf's Den, guys. Winter Wolf here, Kingsley over there. He's looking goofy as usual. It's speaking of goofy though, it's a week after the Acolyte, and since we're out of show to talk about, I just kind of wanted to touch base with Kingsley one more time and do like a gross post mortem of the show. Just kind of nail down a couple of points that really just made it not work for us. As we were on the same page when you, me, and the Armorist were doing the show up. Our total ratings for the whole show out of 10, they were like somewhere like 2.5, 3 or less for like the whole thing out of 10. It was not a good show. But where you've got a background in some creative fiction and I've got a background in some creative fiction, we figured maybe we just talk about what didn't work about the show and maybe one or two key points that, like, if they just readjusted, a character here, a plot point there, how the show actually could have worked. Because I think one of the things that we both said during our reviews of the individual episodes was it's not as if this show was completely without any original ideas or maybe not original, but interesting ideas. That there were some kernels in there that I think could have worked. And I think the take on wanting to do a show that kind of gets at the inner workings of the Jedi as an order and maybe some of the politics and what might have led to their downfall during the prequel trilogy, like there was some room to maneuver there, but I think their approach was all wrong. So maybe to get things started, just give me your general impression of why the show didn't work for you, and then maybe we can just pare it down and figure out some of those key points. So what didn't work for you, big picture view?
So just when I thought I was out, you pull me back in.
I did. That's the second time I've heard that joke today too.
Hey everybody, why don't you leave in the comments what you liked about the show, what you didn't like about the show, and maybe how you would have fixed it. All right, so what was the question again? I'm sorry. I was
dude, just like big overview of the show. Like we talk ratings all throughout the episodes. The big question for you right now is your overall take on why the show didn't work. Just overall.
So number one, I think the show didn't work. One, because it didn't stay true to the universe that it was set in. It tried to reinvent the wheel, which has already been rolling down the road for 30 years. It also didn't work because of very slow, clunky dialogue that had no point. It had no nuance. It was always right on the nose and only what would drive the plot forward. And also what it didn't work is it didn't highlight some of the characters that could have had some interesting stories. And I believe the editing was like this show could have been saved without making any rewrites, without any of the dialogue change. It could have raised up at least 20% better if the editor had enough cojones to say, hey, no, this doesn't work like this in these episodes. Let me cut it. Or if the screenwriters try to not write a 8-hour movie and then cut into 8 episodes and actually write an episode for episode type screenplay.
Cool. All right, that's pretty good take, and typical for your viewpoints on the breakdowns we do is a lot of that was focused on the technical side of things. That they handed you the story, you were just coming at that on more of a how it could have been manipulated a little bit better to make a more entertaining product. I'm going to come at that a different way because I tell you, I've spent way too much time over the last week thinking about this show, and I'm kind of annoyed with myself that I did. But I tried to sit down and kind of outline out, like, if I wanted to stick true to what this show is trying to do, like if I wanted to tell the Acolyte story about the twins and about the Jedi away team that went down, and I tried to keep like a couple of core aspects to it. And from the creative side of things, you know what I figured out real quick was they told this show and focused on the wrong characters as their mains. Like the twins shouldn't have been the mains. Like it should have been the masters, I think. And I think that would have made for a more interesting show. Like you could have had, if Smilo Ren was a more focused character up front teaching May, and that Vernestra was operating in the background with her manipulations, and we all know that she's Saul's former master. There's a through line there. And then we get obviously Saul back on scene as Osha's former master. And those three relationships and how they all failed for whatever reason, at different points in the timeline. I think that would have been a better focus. And of all of those, I think I would have put Saul as the main guy. Like I would have opened the show with him, I think, suffering from the fallout of both the incident on Brendock, but also of having Osha not complete her training and leave the order for whatever. I mean, she said I failed because I couldn't get rid of my negative emotions for my sister, but that's generic, non-specific. I wanted to see that. You know what I mean? And I'd want to see people dealing with the fallout of that, Saul and Osha, obviously. So I think right off the rip, they just putting it as the dark side, light side twin thing. They just retreaded old ground with that. Like we've seen that done and done better in print. You know, so I don't think that was the way to go here. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that particular aspect of the show real quick.
Well, I mean, if you look at it with the master thing, that's technically been done too. I mean, if you really look at
Yeah,
the
that's the bread and butter.
the
Sure.
the, st- the storyline of Anakin, you have or you have Yoda, whose
Yep.
Padawan was Count Dooku. Count Dooku became master. His Padawan was Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon
Qui-Gon Jinn.
Jinn was
Mhm.
Kenobi. Kenobi
Sure.
master to Anakin, and then led to the dark side.
Yep. I still like the idea because I feel like it's one of those things that it's the familiar thing that fans can ground themselves in, but then the nuance take you spin on it as the individual creator is where you get to flex out and you get to come up with creative reasons why those relationships each didn't work out. And if you have if you boil this show down to having one or two Jedi that are kind of morally ambiguous and gray versus trying to paint the entire order as that way, which is what this show is going for, I think that people can gravitate towards that a little bit better than trying to just gray wash the whole thing. I think that's where a lot of people jumped off the ship on this show is the just
So
the portrayal of the Jedi as all
yeah.
being idiots or compromised.
Yeah, and I was thinking a lot today about what I was going to say on this
Yeah,
episode when we came up with this idea when we had the state of the channel meeting the other day, and
yep.
one of the things I was thinking about was how to make it better, and like what would have been a little bit different is if you had, instead of having I don't want to call him Smilo Ren anymore. I just want to call him by like a real name. We'll call him Ren. I'm just trying to call him Ren. That's who he
But
is.
he's the stranger technically in the script. We can call him
Yeah.
that begrudgingly. I didn't want to call him that, but okay.
Yeah. So his character could have been a lot better. Like you could have kept the first episode. First episode, setting everything up. You can clunk through the first episode.
Mhm.
I think I
Most
would
of
have
those shows
changed.
do.
I think I would have changed the way they killed Jedi Trinity.
Mhm.
Because I think it was very um, cliche, as well as it kind of downplayed the power of a Jedi. Because I mean, if you go back to how she was killed, May threw the dagger and she went and stopped it instead of just knocking it aside and then coming back up. And then she stayed and looked at it for a while, like it was like a death,
About 10
like a
minutes.
Star Destroyer. It was like she was trying to stop a Star Destroyer instead of a 2-ounce knife, throwing knife. Like she had like
Right.
there's nowhere have you ever seen true fatigue from force fighting unless you're doing something extremely heavier than what your
Massive.
body weight and stuff can like that. So I think they could have done her death a little bit better. Like you could have had May where she learned this wicked like kill move that she learned with the knives that
Yeah.
took her down. So it would have shown her power a little bit better. Now I know she's still supposed to be training, but she was sent out to kill Jedi. That means she was at least ready to take on masters of the
Right.
Force and lightsabers. So I
Good
think
thought.
she deserved a better death. But what I would have done is like you introduce the bad guy at the end with his red lightsaber, but then you did have him like you don't know who he is, what he's about, about the helmet and stuff like that. You did change the story instead of like a failed master and a student, or a rebel Jedi and a student, or a fallen Jedi again. You did had a infiltrated Jedi, a guy on the outside who's coming in to learn more to try to take them down from the inside, and that's who his character
Hey.
could have been. So he would have been the mole trying to find himself type story. So I
That's a
think
great take.
that
great
was
idea.
one way they could have really changed that a lot. Like, and then he could have been fascinated with May or Osha during this time, because when she was in the academy, or not the academy, whatever.
Jedi Order.
Yeah, the
Training.
Jedi Order
Yeah,
in
Jedi
training,
Academy.
he could sense her power and her emotion, knowing that she could have outed him any time, so they had the same thing, but she didn't know what she was doing. That's why he was drawn to her. And then he started using May because he knew he found May as well, and it was his link to get to Oshi after she'd left the order. And that's how I could have played it.
Dude, I love that idea. That's I'm gonna hit that real quick, and then I'm gonna go on to the next thing I wanted to say about the changes. I think one of my biggest complaints with this show on the story level is that, like, you think that the original meeting between May and the stranger would have been something they wanted to show. Like, that should have been a pivotal moment in each of those characters' relative lives up to that time point. Like, what were the circumstances where they met? Was it something fantastical, like, the stranger was the only male born to the witches? He was their first attempt, but they outcast him because he was a male, but he still lived on Brendok somewhere. And then when the Coven Jedi hostility thing happened, was he back at the base for some reason? Is he the one that force caught May? Did he save her somehow from the fall in the first place, which was dumb? You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to see how those two came together, because in my head that's kind of a momentous meeting, like Qui-Gon meeting Anakin on Tatooine, or Luke bumping into Yoda and going through like the whole, oh, I'm a green buffoon puppet, yada yada yada, my food, my, like that whole thing, and then he assumes the position and he becomes Jedi Master Yoda. So I wanted more from that relationship. I think this show just glossed past anything that would have had any legitimate emotional stakes, like those kind of meetings or those kind of disappearances. Like, when you juxtapose the end of this show where the sisters are in each other's arms crying as one of their memories is wiped, I'm like, no, this isn't Luke destroying the Death Star. This isn't Han putting on carbonite and Luke losing his hand. This isn't the thrill of the Death Star being defeated and Vader throwing the Emperor down the chute. Like, there's nothing here. You know what I mean? You guys had 8 episodes to put together some kind of story that would have made me think or feel one way about these characters, one way or the other. But really, all I felt was apathy. There just wasn't enough to the presentation there for me to care about
Especially
any of
when
them.
you think that there was no real states of wiping her mind, so
Right.
they all could have left together.
Yep. Just saying. My ship's over there. Your ship's over. Okay. When we go there and we can all go our separate. Yeah. It's. And I've seen people defend that online all week, and I'm like, dude, I don't care if his ship is a 2-seater. Like, dude, there's ways you can evade and get to where you need to go. Tell that
Mhm.
story. But I like your story of could the stranger have been an infiltrator type character, and then they could have focused more on stuff at the order in the flashbacks and not the 3-episode flashback demise of the witches, which taught me nothing new except for the last one, which was a big letdown. So
Man,
there's all
I've
that.
already talked about how to fix that. Like, that should have been
Oh yeah,
part
for sure.
of, like,
Yeah,
it should have been part of other episodes. Those 2 episodes should have been
multiple spin-off.
flashback scenes, like why
Yeah,
they're walking, they start telling the
yeah,
story, and then you have
yeah.
the
And
cut
then,
to it, so you see it, and then you have the cut back or move on from it. Like, you didn't need a whole episode to explain everything, because there was so much stuff in those episodes that was just
and they did
filler
that
for the
twice.
streams.
And
Yeah,
they did that twice, dude.
and
And
the
in eight,
second
and we
time,
say this all the time. Yeah, God, dude.
and like you could do that whole, you could do it twice, but the second time needs to be from a different point of view, which they try to
Right,
do, but it's supposed to provide more information, not the
right,
exact same
right.
information from a different camera
Um,
angle.
right, right. Well, and they'll try to argue out that, oh, well, we got to see what Saul saw on the inside of the base. Like, yeah, but I already knew that. I
Yeah.
already saw that, because from the witch's point of view, they stopped what they were doing and looked up to where they thought an intruder was coming in from the roof, which is a whole separate can of worms for why does your front door have a lock if the whole thing is open up top and they broke in 3 times that way anyway. But that's not one of the changes. The change I wanted to run by you, when I was sitting down with my notes and I was trying to figure out a way to improve on this show, I think the kill order for the Jedi was completely wrong. I think that if they were going to utilize these flashbacks, they should have portrayed Torben as some kind of reckless hero wannabe, or having some kind of backstory element that lent him to want to go home sooner than later, and he should have been the first one to die, because he ostensibly was the youngest, least experienced of the 4 Jedi crew. So May should
Mhm.
have cut her teeth on him, and then escalated hostilities through Kelnaka, through Endara, even though she was the leader of the team, but then for story reasons, obviously ending on Saul. So any ideas on the kill order? Would you have done Torben differently in that context? Would you have put Kelnaka in there first and just bang him out like, oh no, May's a super threat. She destroyed a Wookiee or whichever else. We never got to see that fight. It didn't happen. He
No,
was
because
killed before she even got there.
yeah, he
Ranger
was
God.
already dead in his
What did you just think
gaming
of changing the
chair.
kill order? What did you just think of changing the kill order, like in terms of for escalating stakes reasons?
I can understand killing Kadara right off the bat. One, to show your power, show your prowess. Like, you're
Yep.
taking out the leader of the team. She was the most front vocal one. Like, she had the most lines talking to the witches.
Mhm.
But I mean, yeah, and saving Soul for last, because he was the target all along. Like, if you're thinking of it from a killer's standpoint, I mean, one of the things I studied in college was serial killers. I mean, I have a major in criminal justice with a minor in psychology that focus on behavior analysis. So I actually profiled a lot of these serial killers for papers and stuff. And like, take Ed Kemper,
Mhm.
for example. He killed a whole bunch of other girls to lead to his main target, which was his mother. This could be like, all of these guys they're all associated, but you had to kill them around to get
Yeah.
to the main one. So
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, she witnessed Saul cut Mother Anastasia down, so I get why that would be one of the motivations to do it that way. So maybe changing the kill order wouldn't be as effective as I initially thought, but I think focusing more flashback time to the Jedi ahead of them having that interaction with the witches, maybe even not caring what order that they were on the kill list. But I think I needed more from them ahead of time so I could see how their lives had been after the fire on Brendok. We see only little bits. We got Torben in a force coma for 10 years, even though he somehow achieved the rank of master after the fact, despite his glaring deficiencies as a Jedi Padawan, right? And then we
mhm.
get, Kelnaka is just there. He's using the Wookiee metal detector on the beach. And I'm like, okay, but I don't know anything about him. They try to explain away his life after going into seclusion because he was embarrassed that he ended up with the Mad Claw condition that came out around KOTOR. I'm like, but they never mentioned Mad Claw on the show and how Wookiees are supposed to, when they're in civil company, suppress the rage and not use their claws in battle. They're supposed to be above that. You know what I mean? Didn't get any of that. We didn't get really any after effect of Saul. For all we know, Saul went on with his life. OSHA dropped out of the academy and herded her. He's now a master and doing his own thing. And it
Mhm.
wasn't. I think there wasn't enough there. For, again, they're all paper thin, like you said in one of our reviews. They're all one. They're not even two dimensional. They're one dimensional. Like they each
Yeah.
have like one adjective after their name in the story Bible. They're all one dimensional, so I didn't care. Heroes and villains aside, and I think, and then we that dumps us into the soup, and we're like, if everybody's one dimensional and we don't know what really any of them want outside of a simple revenge motivation for one character at the beginning, then I don't care because I don't know what any of you want.
Yeah.
So it's that makes it even less. We were talking about gravitation earlier in the beginning of this, so that makes it even harder. So what else would you have changed? That was mainly my thing was the kill list then, and then I had some ideas on the ending. But what else might you have changed just in the story, not the technical side of things? Would you have changed characterizations? Would you have moved one person here or there? Would you have eliminated a character? Say I don't know. Like what else did you come up with?
I would have turned it into a true mystery type thing. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think you would ever saw the actual battle between Jedi Trinity and May. It
Mhm.
would have been told from point of views and eyewitnesses as they start to
Mhm.
investigate. Like I said, I would make Ren, or the stranger, as one of the Jedi who's doing his own thing, who infiltrated the order so he could train and find his acolyte, uh his person. And then
And
he's
he's the one
there,
investigating the murder.
he's
Very
investigating the murder.
CSI.
Like, it was like that they have a four-man team. Like, you could
Yep.
use shirtless dude, his Padawan, Soul, because he
Oh,
needed
dude, I
something to
forgot those were
do.
even characters because we haven't seen them in a month. I totally
Yeah,
forgot
they'd have their
return
net
from
broken
Melkor,
on
yeah. Yep,
the lightsaber battle.
yep, that's right. Yord. That's right.
Yord, and whatever her name was.
Yord not gonna be in season 2, but anyway. Okay. Jackie.
Jackie,
Jackie.
yeah. So it could have been the four-man team of them, kind of like the four-man team that went to uh what Burdock,
Brendock.
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 Yeah. So it'd be like the same 4-man team type setup, like where Soul would be in charge of the strike team. You would have Rin there as just another Jedi Knight, and then you would have Yord with his Padawan. Same setup, same build, which would start triggering stuff because you would start seeing patterns developing that led them back, and that's how this whole thing would go, lead them back to Brendock, where the big reveal was, and then.
Digging that is a good change. I think there's a billion videos out there on YouTube and just other people with rando comments on all those things. But I feel like people have put a lot more thought into head canonizing and just redeveloping this show than what they got on in the actual show for 8 episodes. And it's just weird because I don't think I've ever seen such a skeleton of an idea put out there for $180 million and then left so much space for us to have to fill in or correct for them or explain on their behalf, like the nonsense with the bleeding, the kyber crystal and the sabers all over, Twitter and other and fan pages that I know you follow on Facebook and things like that.
Yeah, I would also made it a lot earlier, like further away from the Skywalker saga. I would have made it.
Oh yeah, it did need to be connected. Yeah, it did need to be connected.
They didn't
any way, shape, or form.
I mean, unless the only connection you would have is technically Yoda, because I mean you don't want to go back 800 years. So
yeah, but I mean,
not have Yoda.
You
don't need to put him in there. But you don't need to put him on the table either. He could be just a Jedi Master in the Order at that time. Like you could go back far enough where he was till he was just a Jedi.
I mean, there's ways to get around. I mean, you could have whoever you want there if you did them right, and then you wrap your story up in a way. And this is my big gripe with just the Jedi treatment through the whole thing, is you can't have Coyote Mundi and Yoda here, and then in your head, I don't know how people can do this, honestly. Like it's I get it. There are fans out there that are our age that like the show. So it's not a case of everybody in one age bracket liked it, another age bracket didn't. There's certainly a Venn diagram that applies here, right? But I don't get how, if you just accepted George Lucas Star Wars as being canon, as being like the story, how you're just okay with anybody willy-nilly altering those things to make your story. So if you have those characters alive at that time frame, like every Jedi alive, unless there's the big cover up, which I can't accept, would know that there was a Sith. So I'm saying if the show is only going to get the one season, it should have just ended in a way where they were all dead, where literally everybody involved, except for maybe one person who could perpetrate the lie, like Vernestra, like if they're going to, but they're not going to, because she's a High Republic character. And I think I haven't read the books, but I think she's a good guy. So she can't carry that secret and be on Coruscant in the temple because they would know. But if it was a nobody Jedi, again, like if they didn't bother trying to connect it to anything else, they could have done this whole thing, and she could have been a non-nobody Jedi on planet King Z, right? And covered the whole thing up, and then never had to answer for it because nobody on Coruscant would have ever known. Outside, hey, there was the murder of a Jedi. Oh, this, and this happened. Oh, you've captured and executed the person, whatever. Done. Like she could carry whatever cover up or lie she wanted after that and call it, but they try to put that wide brush and get and implicate them all. I don't like that. It didn't work.
Like there's no such thing as communication logs.
You know what I'm saying? That there's a million things, but there's ways you can wrap up that kind of cover up story. Dude, all lives lost. I don't know. Like, dude, pull an alien. Like, you know what I mean? Like you tried to get to the escape pod and you thought you had your Ripley on the way out, but then it didn't work out and you died. And then the story ended. You still told your story, but you didn't have to drag 2 Jedi Masters 100 years later through the mud. Same thing with the Plagueis situation. Like, all right, so you put the first live action appearance of like a major villain in universe in this garbage show. Like, really?
Yeah, where he's like supposed to be like 15 at the time if it stayed to
the age isn't locked down in its entirety, but he could either be -12 or 15, right? Yeah. But like he's a major villain in universe, like, and they dump him in this show. It would have been like if they had introduced like Thanos in like, I don't know, Secret Invasion or some bullshit. Like, no.
Oh, and it's also the way they did it. He was like the lurker in this in the cave. Yeah, just Let me
Yeah,
see.
yeah, we did with the weird fingers grasping the side of the wall. I'm
Yeah,
like, dude, no, he's like a
and if you
powerful figure, like a banker and a brilliant mind, and
and if you pause and look at his head, it looks just like Snoke.
yeah, it's but they already put him in as Plagueis, so I don't know. Like, are they going to try and connect? So one of Plagueis's failed experiments became the Snoke 80 years later. I don't
Became
know,
the
150 years later.
well, I mean, so you have cloned Palpatine. Maybe he before he wanted to try to clone Plagueis too, so they could be together again.
I don't know. I'm not going down the clone rabbit hole on that one. I'm just going to lament that they wait. It'd be like bringing in Asajj Ventress into live action this way, or pick another from an animated or from from one of the books. I don't know. The Mara Jade. It'd be like it would
Yeah,
honestly have been like bringing Mara Jade into Ahsoka or some bullshit. I'm like, okay, so here's 70-year-old Mara Jade on the Ahsoka show. Like, no, not what I needed. You know what I mean? It's just
actually, she
stupid.
wouldn't have been 70 because when Ahsoka takes place, it's during the height of Skywalker and him building the new Jedi Temple.
Oh yeah, so she would have been 50. Yeah, dude, I don't need 50-year-old Mara Jade either. Like Mara Jade's first appearance in live action needs to be like 25. Needs to be like Sith Emperor's hand, like badass fighter. Like that's who she needs to be. Like she needs to be like in peak physical condition to like to be an agent of Palpatine. You know, like I wouldn't buy into seeing like they're doing with that stupid Borderlands movie in a couple of weeks where they put what's her name as great as she is an actress now, Kate Blanchett in as one of the core characters in Borderlands. Like, no, that's a role for like a 25-year-old. You know, like it's supposed to be somebody young. It's not supposed to be somebody pushing 70 or however 60 or however old she is. It just doesn't work. If you know the IP and you know the background, it just doesn't it never balances out. Cool. So the only other thing I think that I might have changed about the show as I was ripping off ideas through my head, I wanted to see more of the witches and how they functioned and how they beyond like just them being afraid of the outside world. I think I would have devoted more time to them being positive, like with each other, with their culture, with the kids, not necessarily just lecturing them about the outside, but just being like the normal family unit. That way, if you're trying to paint the Jedi as the hostile, as the takeover crew, as the Jedi arm of Child Protective Services, it hits a little harder. But they screwed up in a couple of ways. Like they show up and the Jedi are led to believe that there's shady shit going on and nobody tries to disavow any of that. You know what I mean? So they automatically paint the Jedi as being concerned for kids, which for everybody on the planet except the American left is a good thing, is a noble thing. That if I was walking by a house and I heard a kid screaming on the inside, for whatever reason, like don't hurt me, like the door is coming down. You know what I mean? Like that's how normal people are. You protect your kids. So I think that if the show really wanted me to think the Jedi were the bad guys and not just stupid, because they did a better job painting them as stupid than evil, except for the cover up at the very end, which was led by women at all their levels of power, like within the order there, which was hilarious. That it's Indara that proposes the cover up, Osha that dropped out and became the murderer, and then Vernestra that signs off on the cover ups. I'm like, okay, I guess women can be bad guys too. Great. But I mean, we should have seen the Jedi doing ill shit to get there if you wanted me to think that they were the bad guys. Like if they were Jedi that were on the process of falling or going rogue. I wanted to see more of that. And one of the things I would have inserted if I was telling my version of the story, I was going to do it the other way where some Jedi are starting to go, some of the witches are starting to go, but there's good people on both sides because that's how you tell these kind of balanced kind of stories. Is what I had the Jedi investigate, and maybe they stumble across evidence of child sacrifice or something. Not too graphic for Star Wars. We don't need to go all Hellraiser here, but we should like more concrete evidence that something awful was going on, and not necessarily because one guy saw one girl force trap a butterfly, and like that was it. Now we got to go to the base. We got to go knocking on doors. We got to slice the door to go in based on that. Like no, bro. Like how about a graveyard that's got 24 headstones that all have short-lived lifespans? You know what I'm saying? Something like that. And I go, holy shit. Or if you would set up Indara, this is another idea I had, as being kind of like a Jedi expert, because I think they do this in High Republic where the Jedi all have like disciplines, like how Star Trek, the science kind of department. They all have specialties like astrophysics, this, that, and the other thing. Like the Jedi are kind of like the maesters in Game of Thrones in High Republic, where they each have a discipline kind of thing. I would have set one of them, maybe Indara, up as like an expert on Xeno language, Xeno culture, something like that. That way, when they get to the planet, maybe she recognizes vaguely some symbols that represent occult use of the Force, and that tips a red flag. And then they go and they find the kid graveyard, boom, red flag. And then when they actually investigate the witch's base and they're looking around, maybe one of them, since they can fucking read minds apparently in this world, catches a Force vision mind reading of one of the other witches that's not like their master, and they know for a fact that ill shit's going on. And then this way here, you've breadcrumbed your way into the Jedi having their justification for doing some shit, while also trying to do the Star Trek Prime Directive, we can't interfere with their culture. This is just how they are. Like, this is what they do. It's the key to their lifestyle, their culture, their relationship with their God, whatever, their relationship with the Force. I needed more of all that stuff, but like you said at the beginning, we got this happened so this could happen. And then they went there, and then this person came, and then they did this. Too simple.
There was too many plot devices. There were too many happenstance type things instead of
contrivances.
Instead of it just flowing. And the thing that we have about the witches is like, the whole thing was like the Jedi were there to investigate a possible virgins, because a planet that survived a hyperspace accident, which we have no idea what it is or what it actually did to the planet. They just said hyperspace to be vague as possible, because they probably didn't want to explain it. Was
True.
That now you have these twins that are the same person that they find out, but what they did is they used the virgins in like the worst way possible, because look at this. The witches needed the power of the virgins to pull this off, and be able to pull off any of their power, because it's supposed to amplify the power of the Force. Kind of like in the comic book, there was that one crystal that Vader grabbed that amplified the Force by 10 times. And he used that. The Virgins is supposed to be even stronger than that, as it can create life, as we know with Anakin and now the twins. And it could be the planet itself. So these witches have grand power because they have the Virgins there, meaning that without the Virgins, they're just pretty much normal people. But then you have trained Force users on the same planet, and they're not as powerful as the witches in the Force.
You said this right along, right? That it should have bumped both sides.
You should have bumped both sides. Yeah. So it would have, and they were more focused in it than what the witches were. And this is also shows that the power of the Dark Sisters would have like trampled this covenant of witches. Would have just walked over them.
The Night Sisters, you mean?
Yeah, the Night Sisters. Yeah.
Dathomir. Yeah. Just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Because their manipulation of the Force into their witchcraft would have just walked through these. Which, I mean, as I said, we've had instances of witches that could use the Force in Star Wars universe, as we saw in Clone Wars, and now the Ahsoka series. So. Why reintroduce witches that are weaker, who should have been the seed for the Night Sisters, but instead they're just another covenant that died by, we're going to take you out of his mind, which that probably showed the closest thing of their power being more amplified. Like they should have had like moments where they're talking about like how I feel the Force more here, and like they could have been able to sense those people further away, but they didn't do any of that. And like Soul had like, I would say, Force amnesia. Like he forgets that he's a Force user and how to use things.
7 times, dude. Every piece of combat, every single one.
Combat, sensing people,
reading people when necessary.
Can't tell the difference between Osha and May.
Got a tattoo on her head. Cool. Didn't see it.
And
cut her hair.
With the one swipe of a lightsaber and has a perfect haircut like your sister. Have you ever tried to cut your hair in the mirror? I mean, look at your shave job.
I know it's terrible. Listen, this was the haircut you wanted when we reviewed Damsel though earlier in February, right? Where she took the rusty, dusty, crusty dagger off like the cave floor and like gave herself the perfect like Hollywood do for $800. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what you
gave
wanted,
herself a
dude.
little pitsy cut.
Dude, she hooked her and dude, was she not adorable? Dude, she was the best part of the movie and she was the worst thing in the movie. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying about that. But I think you're right about the Force versions thing, man. It's like, would it not have been cooler to see, like we were talking about Torben a little while ago? Like he should have been the one, the youngest, least experienced member gets off the ship, or even while they're descending, be like, something's different here. And then it maybe it drives him a little crazy, and then it
Um,
amplifies his fear about wanting to go home. And then
yeah,
when the shit hits the
it's
fan,
driving him that he wants to get off because of
right?
instead, if he just wants to go home because he's a whiny teenager.
But it could have been anything. He could have had a dying whatever at home. He could have had an illicit affair at home. I don't care what it was. She could have planted a fear in his head and knew that being on the planet for a prolonged period of time would have amplified the fear in his head. Could have driven him to madness, self deletion. Maybe he murdered Kelnaka on this. Dude, there's a million other ways this show could have went, and it's like it's statistically improbable that they went the worst possible way in every direction. But dude, like if we look at this show road mapped out with all the branching decisions that they made story wise, I think they picked literally the worst option they could have at every possible opportunity.
It's the worst timeline.
Yep, yep. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what else. Do you have anything else you want to add to the post mortem on the Acolyte? Because I'm good.
So one more thing that you could have done
Yeah,
for the whole versions is that with the twins, Osha and May, they were divided by, and they tried to create life, and they couldn't do one, so it had to be split into two because they didn't know what they were doing.
Yep.
You could have had it where they came back and it gave birth to the virgins that would have made Anakin, instead of it being done before and like now he's not special, but because they came together with the virgins there, it made it possible to create the one life that brought balance. That way you just straight corrected everything that you undid.
The Force Virgins thing was definitely something I put a little bit of time into trying to sort, and I was trying to get away from doing anything immaculate Force conception birth at all. And I had come up with a couple rando things. I thought the Force amplification thing could have just been the MacGuffin of the show, period, and that the twins, if they wanted twins, could have just been girls that one of the other witches was pregnant with, and then they brought her into the coven. Or that the witches regularly leave like Wicker Man style to get pregnant and come back so they can propagate and continue the coven. Because like I think you said it like episode 2, like where's this coven going? Like they got like 50 people here. They've only done one birth in 16 years that they've been on this or however long they were there. Like you're done. You're cooked. You're not immortal. So like that could have been a thing. Like the virgins on the Force could have that hole that was in their the fortress that they were doing the ceremony around for the ascension. Like what if that was some weird dark side fountain of youth thing that gave them a little power and stretches of immortality, but again, still don't need the virgin birth to undermine that story element. There's a laundry list of concepts that the virgins could have represented, in place of the twins thing. That didn't need to be there at all. That was a tactical, deliberate decision to say, no, you weren't the first after all. The same way Doctor Who undid the Doctor's origin with the Timeless Child. Same shit. Like that's every franchise is doing this. Mikey Spock was better than Spock before Spock was Spock. Doctor Who did that. Star Wars has done this. When they remake Stargate, they'll figure out a way to make somebody else have found a Stargate first. It's happening to all this shit. We've seen it in Marvel. We've seen it. It's going through DC. It hasn't made it to their films yet, but that'll happen, I'm sure. But I don't want to get too sidetracked. So, dude, anything else I want to get out here? I think we've talked about the Acolyte enough. When we're done here, I'm never going to talk about the show again because it sucks. So that's all I got on that. So I don't know. I guess if you guys have been here this long, Kingsley would tell you to comment below what you would change about the Acolyte if you were inclined to sit down and do some things. Maybe drop us a little likey and subscribe because we're so close to 300. We'd appreciate it. And yeah, dude. And we'll see you guys in the next one.